In 1926, an Irishwoman walked up to Benito Mussolini and shot him in the face. He survived, barely. The bullet grazed his nose. She tried to fire again. The gun jammed. Her name was Violet Gibson, daughter of an Irish lord. Nobody put her on trial. They locked her in an English asylum for 30 years. She died there, forgotten. Italy forgot her too, which is odd, because she came closer to killing a fascist dictator than anyone would for another 19 years. You'd think that would at least earn a paragraph somewhere in a textbook. It didn't. But that's Ireland, a small island that keeps showing up in history's biggest moments and never getting the credit. They invented Halloween. They gave the English language the word boycott. They built a monument older than the pyramids. And when Europe went dark, a handful of monks on a freezing rock kept Western civilization alive with ink and stubbornness. 5 million people. One island. Let's start with what's on the plate. And in Ireland, the plate tells you more about history than any textbook. Ireland's most beloved dish is mashed potatoes mixed with cabbage. That's it. That's the recipe. Colcannon. Potatoes, cabbage or kale, butter, milk, salt. The kind of food a billionaire's private chef would call peasant cuisine while charging €40 on it on a slate board. But Colcannon was never about impressing anyone. It was about surviving. For centuries, the potato was the only thing standing between most of Ireland and starvation. When the blight hit in the 1840s and the potatoes turned black in the ground, 1 million people died. Another million left. The population has never recovered. Ireland is the only country in Europe with fewer people today than it had in 1840. So when the potato came back, people didn't just eat it, they celebrated it. On Halloween, which Ireland also invented, but we'll get to that, families hid charms inside the colcannon, or the barmbrack, the spiced fruit loaf, depending on the house. A ring meant marriage, a coin meant wealth, a thimble meant you'd be single. You didn't choose your fortune, the mashed potatoes chose it for you. In France, they hide a figurine in a cake and call it an occasion. In Ireland, they hide a ring in a pile of mash and call it destiny. Ireland told your fortune with potatoes, but what it did with a copper pot and a mountain was 300 years of crime. In 1661, the British Crown made it illegal to distill spirits without a license in Ireland. The Irish kept distilling for another 336 years. Poitín, pronounced poitín, named for the little copper pot, pata, used to make it. Clear, unaged, and strong enough to make your ancestors flinch. The British wanted taxes. The Irish wanted to be left alone. So the stills moved into the mountains, into bogs, behind waterfalls, into caves where the revenue officers couldn't follow. A man could be fined, jailed, or have his equipment smashed. He'd build a new still the next week. Poitín wasn't just alcohol. It was a middle finger in liquid form. Every batch was an act of quiet defiance. Every drink was a small rebellion against a crown that wanted to control what a farmer did with his own barley. It wasn't legalized until 1997. 336 years of prohibition, the longest-running ban on a spirit in European history. The stuff survived longer underground than most governments survive above it. In Scotland, whiskey is heritage. In Ireland, poitín is evidence that you can't tax stubbornness. Ireland drank in defiance for 3 centuries, but what it does when someone dies, that's the part outsiders never expect. When someone dies in Ireland, the body goes home. Not to a funeral parlor, not to a hospital chapel. Home, the living room, the kitchen, the house where the person actually lived. The body is washed, dressed, and laid out, usually by the women of the family, and the front door stays open. Everyone comes, not just family, everyone. The neighbors, the postman, the lad from the pub who once borrowed a lawnmower and never returned it. Everyone. And then they stay up all night, talking, drinking, telling stories about the dead person that would make a priest blush. Someone mentions the time he reversed a tractor into a ditch. Someone else remembers the argument he had with a goat. The room fills with laughter that shouldn't be possible next to a coffin. But it is, because this is Ireland, and grief without humor is just silence, and the Irish don't trust silence. Historically, the Merry Wake included games, wrestling, mock weddings, and enough whiskey to float the body out the door. The church spent centuries trying to stop it. The church lost. The keening women, Mna Keen, performed improvised laments so raw and poetic they made grown men collapse. Joy and grief in the same room, at the same time, no separation. In the West, death gets a hushed ceremony and a sympathy card. In Ireland, death gets a kitchen full of people who loved you, and they're not leaving until they've laughed you into the ground. Ireland wakes its dead with laughter. But if you want to see where the living do their best work, find a pub on a Tuesday. The Irish pub is not a bar. A bar sells drinks. A pub runs a civilization. Marriage proposals, business deals, feuds that started in 1987 and will end when someone dies, possibly tonight. The word is crack, pronounced crack. It means fun, but also conversation, also atmosphere, also the feeling you get when a stranger tells a story so well you forget your own name. There is no English translation, which is rich because the word itself crossed the Irish Sea from the English crack and came back Irish. The round system is the law. If you're at a table, you buy for everyone. When your turn comes, you buy for everyone. If you leave before your round, you will be discussed. Not confronted, discussed, which in Ireland is worse. And then the music starts, not from speakers, from the corner, a fiddle, a tin whistle, a boron. Nobody announced it, nobody scheduled it. 3 strangers sit down, nod at each other, and play as if they've rehearsed for weeks. This is a trad session. It happens in pubs across the country every night, and it has been happening for centuries. The Seanachie, the traditional storyteller, held a status in Gaelic Ireland that rivaled the clergy, because the priest told you what to believe. The Seanachie told you who you were. In London, a pub is where you go to avoid conversation. In Ireland, a pub is where you go to remember how. Ireland talks in pubs, but the thing it built 5,000 years ago, that one doesn't need words. 5,000 years ago, someone in Ireland built a monument and aimed it at the sun. Newgrange, a massive circular mound in the Boyne Valley, built around 3200 BCE, 600 years before the Great Pyramid, older than Stonehenge, older than almost all writing. The builders carried 200,000 tons of stone and earth without wheels, without metal tools, without a written plan. Somewhere in the process, someone had to stand in the cold, squint at the sunrise, and say, "Right, that's the angle. Now we move all of this to match it." And then they did. They lined the passage with massive slabs. They carved spirals into the entrance stone with a precision that modern sculptors struggle to replicate. And then they did something no one can fully explain. Above the doorway, they built a narrow opening, a roof box. On the morning of the winter solstice, the shortest, darkest day of the year, a beam of sunlight enters through that slot. It travels 19 meters down the passage, and for exactly 17 minutes, it illuminates the inner chamber. A room that sits in total darkness for 364 days suddenly fills with light on the one morning when the world is darkest. That's not an accident. That's a people who understood the sky well enough to build a clock out of stone, nearly 5,000 years before Copernicus figured out the Earth moves. In Egypt, the pyramids pointed stars. In Ireland, a room older than the pyramids catches the sunrise once a year and holds it. Newgrange caught the sun, but what a handful of monks did on a freezing rock, that caught something much harder to hold. When the Roman Empire fell, Western Europe lost most of its ability to read. That's an exaggeration, but not a huge one. Libraries burned, schools closed, manuscripts turned to ash. The knowledge of Greece and Rome, philosophy, science, literature was disappearing across a continent drowning in war. Ireland had never been a part of the Roman Empire. The legions never crossed the Irish Sea, which meant Ireland missed the fall too. Lucky them. Or maybe just stubborn enough to stay off the map. Monks on the western edge of Europe, in stone cells, on wind-blasted islands, in freezing scriptoriums, started copying everything they could find. Latin texts, Greek texts, pagan texts, anything with words on it. They copied Virgil next to the Psalms, Aristotle next to prayers. They didn't judge the material, they just saved it. And then they sailed back to Europe and reopened it, monastery by monastery, school by school, book by book. The Book of Kells, made around 800 AD, probably on the island of Iona, has a single page so detailed it reportedly contains up to 30 interlacings per square inch. The monks ground lapis lazuli for blue. They ground orpiment, an arsenic mineral, for yellow. They mixed urine with lichen for purple. The colors are still psychedelic 1,200 years later. One page, smaller than a dinner plate, hiding lions, snakes, birds, cats, and mice, all woven into letters that spell the name of Christ. Europe was burning, and a monk on a rock was painting mice into the margins of a gospel with a brush made from a dog's hair. After that, I need something lighter. So let me tell you about the time Ireland made the English language admit defeat. In 1880, a British land agent named Captain Charles Boycott was managing estates in County Mayo. Tenants couldn't pay their rent. Harvests had failed. They asked for a reduction. Boycott refused. He started evicting families. The Irish Land League, led by Michael Davitt and backed by Charles Stewart Parnell, came up with a different kind of weapon. Not violence, silence. Every worker stopped working for him. Every shop stopped serving him. The blacksmith wouldn't shoe his horse. The postman wouldn't deliver his mail. The laundress wouldn't wash his clothes. He became invisible in a community that could see him perfectly well. Boycott was so isolated that the British government had to send 1,000 soldiers and 50 workers from Ulster just to harvest his crops. The cost of the rescue was more than the crops were worth. He left Ireland permanently, and his name became a word in English, in French, in Dutch, in Japanese. One Englishman was so successfully ignored by the Irish that his surname entered every major language on earth. In most countries, protest means showing up. In Ireland, protest meant making one man feel like he didn't exist, and it worked so well they named it after him. Ireland turned silence into a weapon, but the night it invented, the one the whole world celebrates without knowing, That's the one that started with turnips. Halloween is Irish. Not American, not a commercial, not a candy company's invention. Irish. Over 2,000 years old. And it started with fire, fear, and carved turnips. Samhain marked the end of the harvest and the start of the dark half of the year. The Celts believed the veil between the living and the dead was thinnest on this night. Spirits could cross over. The dead could walk home. People lit bonfires to keep the dark at bay. They wore masks and animal skins so spirits wouldn't recognize them. They left food at their doors, offerings to keep the dead happy and moving. They carved terrifying faces into turnips, actual turnips, not pumpkins. Pumpkins came later. And set them in windows to scare off anything that shouldn't be there. A turnip with a candle in it looks frankly more unsettling than any pumpkin could manage, less friendly, more accusatory. When the Irish emigrated, driven out by famine and empire, they brought Samhain with them to America, where pumpkins were bigger and easier to carve. To a world that looked at an ancient night of ancestral fear and said, "Brilliant! But what if we added a fun-sized chocolate bar?" Every child who rings a doorbell on October 31st is performing an Irish ritual older than Christianity. They just don't know it. In America, Halloween is a holiday. In Ireland, Samhain is the night the door between worlds was never fully closed. Ireland gave the world its scariest night. But the fact I'm about to tell you about who helped Ireland when no one else would, this one sat with me for days. In 1847, Ireland was starving. The Great Famine had already killed hundreds of thousands. 1 million more would follow. The British government's response ranged from indifferent to hostile. The Ottoman Sultan reportedly tried to send aid, but was told it would embarrass the crown. And then, from the other side of the Atlantic, a donation arrived. $170 from the Choctaw Nation. 16 years earlier, the Choctaw had been forced from their homeland on the Trail of Tears. Thousands of their own people had died from starvation, disease, and exhaustion on a march ordered by the United States government. They had almost nothing. And when they heard that people across an ocean were dying the same way they had, they gave what they could. $170 in 1847 from a people who had just survived their own genocide to a people in the middle of theirs. In 2017, Ireland built a sculpture in County Cork, 9 giant stainless steel feathers arranged in a bowl. It's called Kindred Spirits. In 2020, when COVID hit Native American communities, Irish people raised nearly $2 million for the Navajo and Hopi nations. They remembered. Some debts take 173 years to repay. Ireland kept count. So what kind of island invents Halloween, outlaws its own drink for 3 centuries, and never forgets a kindness? So, what is Ireland? A country that hid a ring in mashed potatoes and called it fate, that brewed illegal whiskey behind waterfalls for 300 years because a foreign crown said it couldn't, that wakes its dead in the kitchen with whiskey and laughter and stories that would make a saint blush. A country that runs its social life through pubs, rounds, and a word, crack, that no other language can translate. That built a room older than the pyramids to catch 17 minutes of sunlight on the darkest day of the year. That saved Western civilization with cold hands and dog hair brushes while Europe burned. That annoyed a land agent so completely his name became a global verb. That gave the world its scariest night and then left, taking the tradition to every country that would have them. that received $170 from a people who had nothing and spent 173 years making sure the world never forgot. Ireland teaches something sneakier. That the small survive by being impossible to ignore, that a story told well is harder to kill than an army, that an island of 5 million people can shape a language, a holiday, a legal concept, and the entire literary tradition of a continent, and still make you think it was all just the crack. There's an Irish phrase, Ní neart go cúr le chéile. There is no strength without unity. And there's another word you'll hear before every drink, slánte. It means health. If you watched our episode on Georgia, you'll recognize the reflex. They say gaumajos, two small countries, half a world apart, raising a glass to the same stubborn idea. You don't toast to what you have, you toast to what's still standing. 5 million people, and a story the world keeps borrowing without giving credit. Ireland never asked for credit. It just kept talking. Every country has a story. I found it. If you like the video, like and subscribe.